And
Go ahead.
even if that is the case, because there is certain biological processes
Yeah.
that do happen at 35 and 45 and 60. That's great, but we can do something about it now. It's 2024. So it's not just that we're just going to sit here and just accept being a lesser version of ourselves.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hirsch Redpun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. With me on Truth Tastes Funny today is Julian Hayes II. He's the founder of Executive Health, a boutique executive wellness consultancy with a mission of helping CEOs, entrepreneurs, and companies operate with world-class health and human performance and gain a competitive edge in today's dynamic business environment. He's also the host of Executive Health and Life. And lastly, he's a Forbes CEO network contributor, and he's authored about 300 plus articles featured in top publications such as Inc., Entrepreneur Success, Chief Executive, and many others. So you can gather that we're probably going to have a conversation about executive health and about what it takes to maintain that. Welcome, Julian, to Truth Tastes Funny.
Thank you so much for having me here, man. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you. So we had spoken a little while ago, actually off the air, about energy and what it takes to sustain kind of positive energy. That might be a good place to start because you certainly bring a lot of it to your work.
Mhm. Yeah, well, when you think about energy, I think a lot of times we think about physical energy. And recently, it's really been on top of mind that we really have to start bringing attention to other aspects of energy. There, of course, there's the exercising in that aspect, but there's really a sense of mental energy. There's a sense of emotional energy. And for some of us, there's what I call like a spiritual energy. And spiritual energy is not necessarily something you think about religion per se. It's more of something that just you have this sense of fulfillment, because a lot of times, and you've probably seen this as well, we've seen individuals who on the surface have quote unquote everything. They're doing well in their job, they're healthy, but something is just missing there that is depleting them of their energy. So when we think about energy, it is a holistic, comprehensive picture that I think we need to address.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think, we can wake up feeling a certain way about things and have a certain ailment, back pain or a cramp or something that could be attributable to anything from stress to poor sleep, anything like that. But how quickly do you kind of dive into the root cause of something versus saying, oh, probably just slept wrong or whatever it might be?
Day one. Yeah, day one, because every individual that I see is essentially a blank canvas that they come to me. And because I use a lot of data, I use a lot of different tests and assessments in the practice, whether that's typical comprehensive lab work that someone will go off for, or there's genetic testing. So there's a lot of different tools in the arsenal that I use at the beginning to really see how this person's living. And how's this, and what's this person been doing? And the more data you have, the more evidence, the more options that you have, and the more precise that you can be when it comes to figuring out, hey, this is a good place to start. And then let's go from there and see how that goes.
And do you find that, people obviously want help and they want to improve their wellness, but, a doctor once told me years and years ago that we operate on what you tell us. 90% of what a doctor's ability to help a patient would be, let's say, is in the truth of the history they give them. Mm-hmm. And so do you find that sometimes we're holding out a little bit on sharing the things that are troubling us, certainly in the working world? And
yeah, I like that question, because a lot of times when we think about health problems, it's really a disguise for a life problem. that's just manifesting itself in a physical element. So you're absolutely correct that a lot of times you would see someone that maybe comes in and some of their lab work is not where it needs to be. And then when we really get to the root cause of why, there's something going on in their life that is leading to this thing.
Yeah.
And that's where you really have to start diving in. And what I mean by this, let's do an example. You can say that someone is a busy professional and they struggle with exercising or eating healthy. And you would say, this person has weight. This person has health issues, weight issues because of that. And you would say, okay, this person just needs to do this thing. But I think a better question and a better approach in this situation is to ask, why is this person not doing those things? What's going on that's preventing you to do those things? And I think there is where more gold is going to lie. There is where these proverbial invisible chains or shackles, if you want to call them, kind of hold us up. So
Right.
is it an issue of this person that is maybe an entrepreneur? We can use an entrepreneur for an example. And we all remember those days, those ramen noodle days, what I like to call them, those
Yeah.
day one days where you're just happy to get something. Everything's a struggle, right? You're just really trying to find your footing. And when you finally get past that stage, the last thing you want to do is go back. So there's a sense of fear that if I slow down, I might go back. And so you have these little things going on there of, so why is this person neglecting their health? Maybe I don't want to go back to there. And I have this belief for whatever reason. And so let's address that. And so if we can find the root cause, the root belief of that, and then work on that, then everything else is going to lock up.
Right. Right. Now that begs the question, what inspired you to get started in this field, in the wellness field, and as a consultant?
Yeah. So curiosity. My background is I initially was going to medical school. I went for a year. And when I was in New York City, I just decided not to go back. But the reason why, after I finished in that first semester, is I found so many people that were living their dream and they were truly fulfilled while also doing a job that they enjoyed. And for me, I really only wanted to be two types of doctor and two types of surgeon specifically, and anything else was going to be a disappointment. So, and then I caught myself in class a lot of times thinking, how can I apply this to my performance and exercise performance and everything? And it wasn't necessarily about the act of being a doctor. I was fascinated with the science, and I ended up going on a bunch of different rabbit holes that had nothing to do with what we're studying, but it's just the knowledge. And then I went to Google and started reading other different things to apply that. And so I left and I did the typical personal training and everything to find something to do. And then the curiosity really came in of how good can I get? What's the next level in this health optimization world, if you want to call it? And so I really started with a curiosity for myself. And then I just figured that there's 7-something billions of people out here. A handful of people have to be interested in it, I think. And then I get to more exposure of talking to other entrepreneurs, talking to other business leaders. And I noticed that people are like, well, I got my nutritionist here, or I got my trainer here. And I was thinking, what if we treated people like an athlete? An athlete has a performance team. What if I could work on creating your very own performance team as well for business people? And I just went with that idea. I have some friends, and some of them became business partners as well with me. And so now we can have a performance team. And now also I can keep myself in my zone of genius and doing the best things that I'm best at. And then delegating the other things for other people.
It's interesting because I think, Julian, what it sounds like you realized in that first semester of were you in medical school? Were you like, so you're in med school and that first semester, and you had the mindset of an entrepreneur and the mindset of a peak performer, or, somebody interested in that. And to look ahead of you at the road that lay ahead in terms of your education and internship, residency, all the stuff you'd have to go through, it didn't really align. What were the types of surgery that did appeal to you, where you were like, well, if I'm going to do anything, it's going to be this?
Ophthalmologist, hands down. I wanted to spend a lot of time doing different eye surgeries, but then also a form of teaching as well. And so a
Interesting.
mixture of being a practitioner and then a teacher as well.
Why ophthalmic surgery?
Yeah, I love the way the physiology of the eye is, because if you were to look at it like on an anatomy chart and then break it down, you would see that the pathways, it's crisscross in terms of the nerves and the arteries and everything. So it's crisscross. So it's a little inverse. And so just how much goes on in the eyes. And plus, in a more esoteric thing, I think the eyes are essentially like a gateway to the soul. And so I feel
Right,
like you can look at someone's eyes, you can kind of see like how their soul is and how they're living life and everything. And so that's the weird, Julian, when I start talking like that. But I do believe there is something with the eyes. But I found the eyes fascinating, and it's connected to the brain. Brain surgery was a little too much for me,
uh-huh.
but ophthalmology was closer to that, to where I'm getting some of the stuff involved with the brain, but then also there's vascular issues as well with the eyes and diabetics and things like that. My father was a diabetic. Aunts and uncles were diabetic as well. And some diabetics started having problems with the eyes and everything. And so it was just a very, very cool area. And I think I had an ophthalmologist as a kid. I think about this, and I thought he was a cool doctor
Yeah.
out of all the doctors I had. And so that might have stuck with me as well. But something about ophthalmology just stuck out to me, and I just became really fascinated with the eyes.
Yeah. I mean, my mom was a medical assistant in the sense that she did all the insurance billing and stuff, but she worked for an ophthalmologist practice for many years. And it was interesting to me. I never thought of going into the sciences professionally. When you
Mhm.
make a shift from a formal med school, path, now, where did you draw the line between I'm going to be more or less a traditional healthcare practitioner versus I'm going to consult
Mhm.
and work within the industry and take a more, like as you said, more of an entrepreneurial route?
Yeah. Well, the easy thing is that there's of course the legality of it, right? So you never say that I'm treating anything or none of that stuff,
I'm
right?
a surgeon.
Yeah, this is all for entertainment purposes. This is lifestyle guidance, et cetera, that kind of thing. But I think also, if you notice the climate of the world, the the idea of personalized health is becoming more and more of a thing now. And you see all these different services popping up of people can order their own labs now instead of having to ask insurance for certain labs. You're seeing all these direct to consumer services. And I just had an idea that this was going to come along in the future. And I knew some people who as well. And I just kind of thought that it just makes sense that this was going there. And so for me, it took a while to find your voice. And I think you're always continuing to find your voice and continuing to evolve. I would tell you that executive health is not the first iteration of my online or entrepreneur's adventure. It's definitely been an evolution. I think as we grow, so too does our brand. And especially in this world now, we are the brand, even though there might be a name behind us or something. I think more and more people connect with the person now instead of just the name of the corporation now. So I think that's
Yeah.
a big thing. And so for me, I there's an interest in health optimization. There's an interest in things like leadership in business. And then I can just combine that with health. And also I thought I needed to find a way to be a little unique, because labs is not necessarily a novel idea. There's other people who do concierge services. You can look up executive wellness, and you'll find a lot of hospitals who do executive wellness programs or executive physicals, all that kind of stuff. So how do you stand out?
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I took a hodgepodge of all these different things to ultimately create what things are now. And one of my favorite musicians is Miles Davis, and Miles Davis was notorious for continually to reinvent himself. So
Yeah.
even when there's a certain wave of music that was popular that he usually started, and other people started to do it, he started to create something else. And that was kind of an inspiration for me. So I hope it's a bunch of different things there. So it wasn't just one thing. So I hope that made sense right there.
No, it did. It did. It kind of touched on, well, it touched on something that's close to my heart, obviously the branding aspect, where personal branding is what I focus on professionally. And the reason I made that change, that shift from corporate brands to personal brands, was exactly for the reason you described, Julian, which is that we are the brand. And quite often today, because of all the different platforms and our ability to put ourselves out there, it used to be if someone was the CEO of a certain company or if someone was the founder of a certain company, nobody really knew who they were because the company was, maybe they had a publicist or they made waves or they did this. It was only a very small sector of people that would know who somebody was behind the scenes. Now, we used to call it influencers, but really entrepreneurs and thought leaders are really the influencers.
Mhm.
It's just the following may be relative to a very specific niche. So it may not be 1 million followers, but I met today a plumber who has 250,000 followers on Instagram because he and his
Wow.
wife are creating a brand around the way they do what they do. And that's fascinating to me, but that's exactly, the personal branding aspect. Now, based on what you say, we could think of you as the Miles Davis of executive health.
No,
Because
I that would be, if I go 10 years in the future and someone says Julian is the Miles Davis of executive health or Julian is the Miles Davis of the health
of
wellness
anything,
space,
right? Yeah.
I would say job well done.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about your experience now working with people. Do you have any stories or case studies or just references for the audience so that they can relate a little bit to how you do what you do?
So of course for confidentiality and everything.
Oh,
So
of course. Yeah,
I'll create a scenario and I think that should suffice.
sure.
So you'll have you can have let's say a 41-year-old founder executive. And so there's a lot of those that are seeming to, I think I'm 37. So you feel like I get a lot more people now around my age range now. It's very
Yeah.
interesting, but you have like a 41-year-old founder, entrepreneur, executive, and maybe a couple kids, young kids as well. And one of the things that you'll hear is, I can do the things that I used to do, but they're harder to do.
Sure.
Yeah. And I always find that interesting of what do you used to do. And then the thing is, sometimes you'll hear, well, I guess that's just part of getting older. And so that's a typical belief that you'll hear because we've been ingrained for so long that as you get older chronologically, that you are supposed to slow down.
You fall apart. Basically,
Yeah.
that's what, because I remember, not to cut you off, but I remember turning 50 a
Mhm.
few years ago and a doctor saying, oh, well, now essentially in implying that now the deterioration process begins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, now you'll at this age, blank, blank, blank.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to what's happening
Mhm.
amongst the species where people are living longer. So I don't know.
Yeah. And
Go
even
ahead.
if that is the case, because there is certain biological processes that
Yeah.
do happen at 35 and 45 and 60. That's great, but we can do something about it now. It's 2024. So it's not just that we're just going to sit here and just accept being a lesser version of ourselves
Right.
and not do anything about it. So that's the key thing right there. So the first thing you do is see where their worldview is. And a lot of times it's in shock of, wow, I didn't know all these things exist. To me, I guess I live in a bubble a lot of times. And this is probably a lesson in marketing and branding as well, that a lot of times the things that you think are so common are not so common. It's just that you are in this bubble and probably around a lot of people who know this as well. So the first thing, so there's a worldview that's just huge of like, I spent a lot of time building my company. Maybe it's got acquired now. And now I'm trying to buy back my health. Or maybe I'm feeling the mental and physical tolls of my position. And then also having a young family now as well. So there's a lot of demand there as well. And so a lot of times it comes down to, I need a structure. I need accountability. I need a plan to get there. And the thing that's appreciated now is that there's not so much guesswork. Now, of course, nothing's an absolute, but you can now really fine tune things when you can essentially use their unique biology there and create something, create a nutrition plan, a fitness plan, health optimization overall plan based on just their specific biology, based on where they are specifically at this time now.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, and the other thing is that in the traditional healthcare system, it rewards, you know, the pharmaceutical industry basically rewards repetition, repeated use, long-term use of medications. That's rewarded versus getting people off meds or using holistic treatments, or there's no benefit in
Yeah.
that to the bigger, you know, corporations.
Yeah, and here's a big point as well, because I had this question recently, and I think I recorded an episode on it as well. And it was the idea of these comprehensive functional labs versus traditional labs. And why can't I just go get these with my insurance? And this is not for everyone, but usually a lot of people, the issue is that a lot of times the way our system is currently constructed, it's based on a more reactive system. So, of course, you can go in for your annual workup and you'll get just a foundational level thing. But unless you are showing something, a symptom or something, you're not going to get the whole treasure trove of lab tests right there.
Right.
Because you're not showing it. And usually it's not even the doctor's fault a lot of times, because sometimes they're saving you money, actually, because if you order those things and there's not a quote unquote need for it, it's probably not going to get covered. And so you're going to get an astronomical charge. And so that's one key distinction there is why a lot of times you see people now going to using some of these other labs services to get a full workup that is much more comprehensive than what they would get in their standardized yearly tests, because these people are preventative. They're thinking they're thinking years ahead. So even if you're healthy right now, let's see, I want to see how is my health at 34? Even if you're super healthy at 34 or super healthy at 40, let's get a foundational assessment at 40. And then now when I'm 50 or when I'm 45, you now have something to baseline against to say, okay, this is how I was performing at this time. So now you have more data and more of a standard to go against. And so that's one of the key things. But like I said, there's so many tools available now and services available to where people can use that. And oftentimes, with so many entrepreneurs taking advantage of it or in creating this stuff, the prices have really gone down in terms of just like getting comprehensive blood work now, thanks to, you know, technology entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's great. That's really interesting. And you're right. Preventative health is, you know, ironically enough, an afterthought, right? Is the doctor gonna maybe they'll say, oh, you know, you should get on this drug because it'll prevent further but it's like, that's not the goal. The goal is to come up with a better diet, come up with a better thing, like you say, based on your chemistry, your biology, and all of that.
One more point to add to that real quick.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think of this all in sequencing. So I know I have some friends who are just vehemently against everything that's, what would you say, healthcare and mainstream medicine and everything. I'm not really like that, because it's a lot of people. I mean, I've had family members where if it wasn't for modern medicine and pharmaceuticals, I wouldn't have got to spend as much time with them. So right. I am thankful for that. I think for me, I think about the sequencing of things. And like you said, if I'm going to the place, I'm going to the clinic with a problem, the first piece of advice doesn't necessarily need to be, take this pill, take that. It's more like, what are you doing in your lifestyle first and foremost? Have we exhausted all those options before going to this? I just think as a whole system-wide thing, the order of operations, the order of our processing is severely out of order.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. And then, you know, as a contributor to so many magazines, clearly there are, as you said, people who are very interested in new approaches to health to better health and wellness. As someone who is always curious and always evolving, what's next for you? What's the next hill to climb, or what are you looking at now?
Yeah, I guess professionally wise, like it's kind of like I mentioned earlier, with so many different services and entrepreneurs doing great work in this space, there's ways now to severely manage the cost of certain things that now you can help more people with that. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about now. Like, so I have a executive health membership now, and there's different tiers in that membership. That's annually, that's all inclusive testing and all that thing. And so you're able to provide a great service, but at a fraction of the cost than what it would take for just a handful of people. And so that I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about also on a more societal thing. I'm excited more just about how I think that more and more people are taking ownership of their health. And I've even seen some of my most non-internet friends that are curious now. So I think for some reason, I think there's a huge shift now in people just being really curious and taking more charge of their own health and looking for answers, even if they don't know what that answer is. I think it's a positive sign that they're actually looking now instead of just being reactive. I think I've seen a lot more people lately becoming a lot more proactive.
That's great. I was going to ask you also, what trends do you see among younger people that are even younger than you, let's say, in terms of, they're new in the workforce, they're out there in the world. What are some of the beliefs and attitudes toward health that you've come across?
Yeah, I wrote about this recently. It's more of a, instead of work-life balance, is more of a work-life integration in terms of, I think probably I'm a middle tier millennial. And I think probably with the millennials and definitely with the one after the millennials, I don't think no longer is it just about salary and making the most money. It's about what am I able to do with that money? There's a lot more predicated on freedom now, quality of life, and mixing those two. So I've seen more people now say, I'd rather make, I don't know, let's say just arbitrary numbers, 70,000 and have a level 10 lifestyle of things I want to do compared to making 100,000, but then not living as much as it in alignment as I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Time for money. How much time? And that's something that I think people of all ages are grappling with, but it's a little bit different when you're setting the tone for your career and setting the tone for your health and your wellness. And because a lot of, previous generations didn't have any plan. My generation had consciousness, awareness, and maybe taking better care of ourselves, but focusing on our children and their experience being a little different, and a lot of emphasis on attitudes, on body shaming issues and perception, idealization of objectification of the human form and all of that. I think being more realistic and less self-judgmental and judgmental in general.
I think things always course correct themselves.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you would see, I would say probably generations a few above me would say people today don't work as hard, or they're not as, and then people, and then the younger people will probably say things about that generation as well. And so it's I think things always course correct themselves and always tilt and shift. And maybe it's the younger people are maybe they watch the generations before them and things they did and they didn't want those. And I think that's what I think each generation actually does that.
Yeah.
They see what the previous generation did. They find things that they really don't like, and then they heavily course correct in something that's opposite of that.
Yeah.
Just like there's a huge debate now with people remote work and going to the office, and there's so many angles with that. Is it good for business? Is it good for people's health and those kind of things? So those are interesting things to see.
Yeah, and as to kind of circle back around and give you the last word, when I have guests on who are from my generation or older generation, I ask them to speak to younger people. I'll ask you to offer some thought to the generations that have come before you that might be listening.
Yeah, I would say that you are very much needed. Actually, you're needed more than ever. I think you have something that people like me and even younger always seek out, and that's wisdom and experience and insight. And I think that's something that you cannot overlook. So, if there's any reason to take care of your health, it's for that. It's because there's generations that are after you that need your wisdom and insight.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.